Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast. The build-up is so nearly done. England in India is about to kick off. There have been a couple of high-profile personnel changes to chat through. We'll be doing our final preview of the tour, talk about one of the all-time great T20 games and mention one of the most amazing stories around a Test debutant you'd have heard in years. I'm Yas Rana, and with me today are Phil Walker and Ben Gardner. Mark Butcher will be joining us later in the show, but first I caught up with Ollie Robinson a couple of days out of the first test to hear how it's all going on in the England camp. Ollie, great to have you with us on the show. I guess I remember last time we spoke after the Oval Test match, you talked about the team environment and how everyone put so much emphasis on creating moments for individuals and how much you sort of care about each other as well as results. I wonder, what's it been like as a group, having spent so much time away from each other from that last test match at the Oval to getting together in the UAE? What was it like when you got back together for that little trip to UAE before you went out to India?
Yeah, it's been quite weird actually. Not to have cricket for that long of a period. It's been strange. I can't remember the last time I haven't played cricket for longer than a few months. Probably when I was a little boy. So to then not play cricket and not be with the lads for such a long period of time, it was very strange. But I think that with the group that we've got and the camaraderie that we've got, there's been a lot of messages to and fro from people and a lot of sort of catch ups. I spoke to Baz a few times, spoke to Stokesy a few times, Jimmy, like everyone was sort of keeping contact still. I think that shows how close we are as a group. But when we met up in Abu Dhabi 12 days ago, it was as if we'd sort of been together like since the Ashes almost. It wasn't really like we hadn't been together for 6 months. Everyone just gelled and clicked straight away. We obviously got some new faces, which was nice to get them involved and get them part of the group, and they fitted in really well. So it has been strange, but it's felt like back to normal pretty quickly, and the group's flying. So it's been a good first few weeks.
What was that break like on a personal level? That's a very long time to go without playing cricket. Did it re-energize you at all?
Yeah, I think the first month or two I was like, oh, this is quite nice. Bit of golf, bit of training, like just a bit of sort of downtime, a mental refresh, physical refresh. And then I think it got to probably end of October, November, and I was like, right, I'm ready to go back now. I'm ready to play cricket again. And obviously we had to wait till January for that. But no, it was nice for a bit, and then I think you just get sort of fed up of being in your living room for half a day and the English weather and all those sort of things. So it's nice to be back on tour with the boys.
And how do you spend that time together in the UAE? Obviously, it's not that long before the start of the series when you first got there. So is it pretty much straight onto the training ground, a lot of hard prep for that first test at Hyderabad?
Yeah, it was, to be fair. We had, I think, 8 days of training in a row. I think there was a day off in the middle. But it was sort of typical Baz and Stokesy. It was very short, sharp every day, but get everything that you need to in. And I think that's obviously the message that's always been from them too. It's not that we want to be in and out of training and we don't want to do things. It's that be really efficient with what you're doing when you're training. So you'll see lads get it sort of fitting in 2 hours of training into an hour, or 4 hours of training into 2 hours. And I think that just makes the training more efficient, makes everyone sort of fill in together and help each other out. There's lads throwing to each other all the time or helping with fielding. There's lads running together all the time. And it just brings that group closer together. We made some good yards in Abu Dhabi. I think there's a few of us that haven't played cricket, obviously, like you said, since the summer. A few have, but a few of us haven't played for a long time. So for the likes of me and Jimmy and Folksy as well, it's been good to have that extra time to prep and sort of get back to bowling on grass or batting on grass. And we had some big days. We had some double sessions, some sort of triple spells, and some sort of big gym sessions, big running sessions. So it was a really beneficial 10 days really. And obviously we've come here now, and me and Jim were saying yesterday actually that we feel like we're actually in a good place, ready to go.
I'm fascinated by how McCullum and Stokes create that environment, because you see a lot of other teams in the world who try to play fearless cricket, and it's one of those things where you can't just tell people to be fearless. You've got to actually create an environment where that feels natural. What do you think it is about the two of them that genuinely create that sort of dressing room environment?
I think it starts from the camaraderie and the training, just allowing everyone to bond so closely. You sort of trust everyone in the team, which sort of, it's a weird thing to say, but it means you're not fearing sort of someone taking your place, or you're not fearing someone like behind. I don't know how to quite describe it, but we've got 16 lads here, and we're always happy for each one of them as another one, sort of thing. And I think they've just built an environment where you know that you'll get your chance to play, you know that you'll get your chance to impress, as long as you do the right things, as long as you put in, help other lads out. And I think if you don't buy into that, you're quickly not in the environment anyway. So you sort of don't really have a choice to do anything else. And I think that's what really allows the environment to flourish. And then the message through training, the message through everything that we do, whether it be golf or training or anything, it's like, go for it. You got a second shot onto the green from 250 yards away for eagle, like, go for it. There's sort of everything we do is go for it and don't have any fear of failure, I suppose. And I think this journey's been 18 months now, 2 years with Baz and Ben, and since day one, that's been the message. It's been no fear of failure. Like, we're here to entertain. If we don't get it right, we don't get it right. But at the end of the day, we're here to entertain and win games of cricket and sort of, just be rock stars, as they would say.
I've got to ask, how competitive is the golf? Because there's obviously a lot written and talked about your guys' love of golf. How competitive is it?
It's very competitive. Yeah, there's tantrums, there's all sorts on the course if it's not going well. So yeah, it's very competitive. We normally play for a shirt or a sleeve of balls. This trip actually, we've just started. Like, I think there's an app on the phone. You put all the names in, spins the wheel, and then it puts players together. Whereas before we'd chuck balls up, or lads would pick who they want to play with. That made it a little bit more interesting. I played with Paul Collingwood actually a couple of days ago, and we were so bad. We were 6 down through 8, which is horrendous. And we were just abusing each other for the first few hours. I was like, "You turned up yet?" And he was having a go at me. And we take the golf really serious, but no, it's been really good.
Obviously, there are a few new faces in the squad: Gus Atkinson, Tom Hartley, Shoaib Bashir. Particularly with young Bashir, 20-year-old, not been in the professional game for very long. What's it like having him along for the ride?
Yeah, it's been good. He's fit right in. He's such a lovely lad as well, to be honest with you. He's very easy to get along with. I'm probably not like the most outgoing person, but with all three of them, I found it really easy to just sit down with them at breakfast, have a conversation. They fitted into the environment really well. And I think, again, testament to Ben and Baz picking the right characters, the right individuals for the group. But yeah, Bash looks really good. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He bowled really well in Abu Dhabi. He's obviously tall, a little bit similar to Ashwin, tall off spinner, and got one that slides on, one that turns. He's pretty impressive, to be honest, as they all have. I've been impressed with Tom Hartley. I've not seen a lot of him, but he's really impressed me. He's an all-round good cricketer. He bats, bowls, fields, like, he does everything. And his bowling in these conditions is going to be quite testing for them, I think. It's similar to Ashwin Jadeja, where he fires it in, one turn, one skid. So I'm excited to see how they go, really, and I think they're going to do well out here.
On your own preparation, I mean, you had a very successful tour of Pakistan in similar-ish conditions just over a year ago. What have you been working on in the lead up to this series?
I think probably trying to prepare a bit earlier than I did for that series. I felt like I actually went into the series a tiny bit undercooked, which sometimes on a away tour is not the worst thing because they are quite testing mentally and physically. But this tour, I feel like I've probably prepped a bit better. Body's in a better place, mind's in a better place. I've studied things a bit earlier. Sort of got all that ready before I got to Abu Dhabi, so I could just enjoy Abu Dhabi for what it was with the team and really sort of get stuck in. I think so far, the wickets that we've seen here in Hyderabad, they're probably a bit drier than they have been in Pakistan. So reverse could come into play a little bit more. I think it's definitely going to spin more. The wicket looked Tuesday, I think it was. No, where are we? Monday yesterday. Yeah, 3 days out. The pitch looked ready. It looked like it was a day two pitch already. So wouldn't be surprised if it turns from ball one, to be honest, and reverses after 20 overs. It's really dry out here. But it's been good. It's been good. The prep's been really good. Me and Jimmy especially have been talking about certain things with the seam and the balls. So I think on a personal level, I feel really ready to go. And I think most of the lads do as well. I think when you don't play cricket for a while, you're even more hungry to get back out there.
Yeah, I saw a stat the other day that said that Jimmy's got the best average of any bowler in India against top 7 batters in this century. So
wow.
He's a pretty good person to have in the dressing room before a series in India. Yeah, what's it been like sort of, devising plans with Jimmy? He's obviously had so much success there.
Yeah, it's been good. There's obviously some days you get less out of him than others. And I think that's part I love Jimmy Anderson, but no, he's been good. Abu Dhabi, I was trying to bowl with him quite a lot in Abu Dhabi just to sort of see what he was doing and speak to him about how he was going about things. Speaking about crease position to seam to reverse, we were using new balls for one spell, 60 over balls for the next spell, and just really trying everything that we could really. But like you said, is the best bowler in the world. He's been the best bowler in India for the last century. It'd be silly of me not to try and learn from him. And obviously get on really well with him on a personal level anyway. So I find it a bit easier to work with him on the field and sort of have that banter and camaraderie with him again. Yeah.
Are you someone who thinks about your plans to individuals? I remember in Pakistan, for example, you basically bowled the perfect ball to get rid of Babar when there was a bit of reverse. Just looking back at the India-South Africa series recently, it took a few perfect balls to get rid of Rohit Sharma at times. Have you thought about how you're going to go against individual Indian players?
Yeah, I have. It's probably just looking at their main dismissal, I would say, is what I look at the most. And if it doesn't fit how I bowl, I'll probably go back to my strongest strength and go that way. But yeah, there's certain individuals that obviously have certain weaknesses to certain deliveries. Take you back to the summer, David Warner around the wicket. Like, it's a no-brainer to go around the wicket. So there are certain plans to individuals that I will go from ball one and stick at, and there are things that I would just stick to my strengths and go from there and probably stick to those. I think notoriously Indian batters haven't done that well against tall bowlers. I think that's sort of a thing. It's just if we get the bounce out here, or if the pitch will allow that. So then if it doesn't, there's sort of the B plan, the C plan that I've got in the back of my head that I've been working on as well. I actually watched some footage probably 3 days ago. I asked the analyst for footage of Glenn McGrath when he bowled in India, and he sent me some stuff from 2004 because I think he averaged maybe 16 in that series. Took loads of wickets, went at 2 and over, like killed it. So yeah, I got him to send me that, and I was just looking at how he got most of his wickets. And I'll probably take a bit of that with me into the games really, and think about how he got his wickets when it's going flat or with the new ball, etc.
People might not remember, but you were in India for the last series. Remind people just how weird that series was in a way, because it was really in the core of COVID times. It was everyone was in lockdown, not just in the UK but in India as well. It was a very difficult series just from a touring point of view.
Yeah, it was probably the hardest 8 weeks I've had as a cricketer, actually. I think the environment being so far away from home, not playing amazingly well, all of those things linked together made it a really tough tour. And I think even now you speak to the lads that played on that tour as well, they're like, that's probably the worst tour I've been on. Like, everyone says the same thing, like that Ahmedabad, we got beat in 5 sessions. Like, everyone remembers those certain things. And I think just the scarring of that, getting tested every day, 2 inches up your nose, like all those little things just stick in the back of your mind. And I think that's what's made this first few days here much more enjoyable for everyone, because we haven't had that, and we was probably expecting the worst because of the previous tour. But no, it was tough, and I think they're probably is a tiny bit of scarring from that. I think our lads have spoken about Ashwin and Axar and Jadeja quite a bit, and that's probably because of that tour. So I just hope that the brand that we're going to play against them is obviously going to be different this time, and we can actually get on top of them and sort of push that to the back of our minds, really. And I think if we can get on the front foot against them, then it will put us in a really good position for the rest of the tour.
One thing I've noticed about the build up to this series compared to last time, and maybe last time it was influenced by just the broader environment around that series, is just the sort of attitude towards what conditions might be like. I think last time there's a lot of energy that went on, what a pitch is going to be like, etc. But this time I sort of feel that you guys are really embracing whatever Indian pitches throw at you. It's not going to be like, it's this one's turning lots and you get your excuses out early. This time it really feels like, like we're ready for whatever. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think even in Abu Dhabi, we got the groundsman in Abu Dhabi to rake 2 pitches and put like sawdust down it, so they were ragging square from ball one. And like Tom and Bash were using brand new balls. Like Ashwin obviously bowls with a new ball sometimes, and the lads were playing sweeps, getting hit in the face, like playing shots that they would normally play on these raggers. And there was no moaning, there was no sort of excuses if they'd got out. It was just like, right, next ball, crack on. Like, how am I going to be better the next time? And that's something that I definitely have noticed under Ben and Baz again. The mindset is so different. I think I take you back to the India tour before. We didn't practice on turning wickets. We didn't practice on the wickets that we were going to face. We just had nice, comfortable practice, like make sure the batters feel good, make sure the bowlers feel good. Whereas this time it's been more uncomfortable, more honest practice. And I think that's only going to bode well for us in the series. I think I'm excited to see our batters play, because the way they've been playing in Abu Dhabi and the first few days here, it's going to be exciting to watch.
I'm sure it will be. Just in terms of the broader context of this series, India haven't lost a series at home since England last won there in 2012. I think they've only lost 3 test matches in India since that series. Should it go well, would this rank at the top of everything this side under Stokes and McCullum have achieved?
Yeah, 100%. I think until now, Pakistan 3-0 would probably be the pinnacle of what we've achieved. But I think if we can win in India, it's right up there with I think, to be honest, the hardest challenge in cricket. I think it's probably harder than beating the Aussies at home. I think it's the hardest thing you can achieve as a cricketer, as a team. So if we can beat these guys, I feel like it will really put fire in our belly to then obviously go on and become the number 1 team in the world, I suppose, and play this brand of cricket doing it. So yeah, it's really exciting to be able to get going and potentially beat India in their backyard.
Well, best of luck, Ollie. We'll catch up shortly. Hope it all goes well in Hyderabad.
Thank you very much. Good to speak to you.
On Phil's suggestion, we're trialing a new section in the podcast where I ask a trivia question at the start of the show, and these guys have the entire episode to try and come up with the answer. So the question this week is, which England opener, post-war opener, and they have to be totally post-war, so Hutton doesn't count, has the highest average, test average, as an opener with a 1,500 run cutoff? You've got the entire show to come up with the answer.
Highest average, male test match.
Yeah.
English opener.
1,500 run cutoff, post-war. Hutton doesn't count because he played a bit before the war.
And you'd prepared this anyway, right?
I just had it in my head. So we were going to do a Christmas quiz, and we never ended up having enough time for it. So
right.
that was the question I was most proud of from the Christmas quiz that never saw the light of day.
Okie dokie.
So just sit on that for the next 45 minutes or so.
I'm not going to be able to concentrate on anything else. The show's redundant. Forget it.
Couple of bits of news from the 2 squads ahead of the India-England series. So for England,
I think I know it.
Harry Brook has travelled home for personal reasons. It was initially announced that he would miss the entirety of the series, but that detail has since been scaled back by the ECB. Dan Lawrence has been called up as his replacement. Virat Kohli will miss the first 2 tests for India, also for personal reasons. Ben Nile asks, who's the bigger miss?
Virat Kohli. he's a better batter than Harry Brook. I don't think that's controversial to say. And in some way, I mean, what's weird about both of them is that it's a tremendous shame for both, for the series that they're out, and you wish both of them all the best. Don't know anything about the circumstances of each, but has to be serious if they're missing a series or any part of a series of this magnitude. And that's the first thought. The second thought, weirdly, is that it kind of makes picking the teams easier for both teams. For England, obviously, they had to fit 7 of that top 8 into the 7, and you're wondering, are they going to sort of mess around Ben Folkes again by bringing him along and not picking him, or are they going to have to leave out one of their big gun batters? And now they just kind of pick Pope, Bairstow and Folkes from that 4, and that's fine. And India actually had a similar problem where there's lots of players you think, they kind of all have to play. You get Kohli and Rohit, you think were nailed on, but then you had Gill, Jaiswal, Rahul, Jadeja probably in that top 6 as well. But then you're like, who's going to take the gloves? Rahul could do it, but he hasn't done it much in first-class cricket, never done it in India. If you want to pick the specialist keeper, you've got to leave it on those guys. And now I presume that they might put Rahul at 3 and Gill at 4, possibly, give him a slightly, because he's not had the best time in Test cricket, give him that bit more cushion, and then have what could be quite fun is a proper specialist keeper, maybe down as far as like number 8 or number 9 in the batting lineup, which is always quite nice to see. But yeah, Kohli's the bigger miss, but then India, I suppose you'd say, have the tools to cover for that miss a bit more. But it's also not as stacked a batting lineup as you sort of imagine because of what India are like in home conditions. Like Rohit is obviously a great of Indian cricket, but he is, aging out of that peak, perhaps.
He just scored one of the best T20 ever last week.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's T20 cricket, different format. But I guess if you're looking for stuff to cling to as an England fan, you might think that there's lots of players there who you think might be proper, like nailed on to be there for a long time. But Jaiswal and Gill are yet to, fully come of age in international cricket. Rahul and Shreyas are kind of in that sweet spot, but are also this. It's not make or break. This could be the series that makes them. I could easily see one or both of them coming out of the series and be like, oh, wow, they are kind of one of the best batters in the world right now. But that's not quite yet happened for either of those as good international careers as they've had. So it's a miss for India, but I think they'll cover it pretty well.
Phil, I'm gutted that Kohli won't be there because he had a very good World Cup in home conditions, but it was that short South Africa tour where I thought this was genuinely peak Kohli. I know he didn't get the substantial score that people will talk about in years to come, but I thought this was genuinely prime Kohli. And there are a couple of segments where Sean Pollock was comparing how Kohli was setting up in this tour compared to previous tours, and actually saying this is the best Kohli has ever looked. So hopefully, everything is. We our thoughts are with Kohli, and we don't know what's going on there, but hopefully we see him later in the series.
You're absolutely right, because it was the perfect moment for the third act of the Kohli Test match story, and it must be a real problem for whatever's happening. As you say, we hope he's okay. We hope his family's okay, because he wouldn't miss this, unless it's a pretty serious problem. Have they called up anyone else?
Not yet, but
they presumably will, right? Because they do look like they need a reserve batsman in there, and it might be that they might want to bolster the batting lineup anyway.
So they've got Dhruv Jurel, who's the sun-capped wicketkeeper batter, but he's kind of in the middle of Rahul and KS Barrett in terms of he's more of a batter than Barrett and more of a wicketkeeper than Rahul, but he could do a job as a specialist batter if someone twisted ankle on the first morning, for example. Okay,
so Sharma, Jaiswal open the batting. You say possibly Rahul might be 3, Gill 4,
Shreyas Iyer
5.
Jadeja 6. He's their 6 in.
So Jadeja is batting 6 in that side, right? Okay.
And that allows them to play Ashwin, Akshar, and 2 quicks as well.
Is there any chance of Pandya featuring later in the series, or is he just...
He's just been completely out of the picture in red ball cricket for so long. I don't think so. I think one thing that...
This is for the first 2 tests, isn't it?
First 2 test squad, yeah. Ben was talking about how, on paper, the India lineup, full of superstars, but actually, when you go through them one by one, maybe Rohit aside, there are question marks of where they're at in Test cricket right now. The thing that worries me as someone who wants England to do well is not the top 5. It's the 3 spin bowling all-rounders, Jadeja, Ashwin, Akshar, not just for what they do with the ball, but what they do with the bat. As we saw in that Australia series last year, it's just so demoralising as an opposition who you get through those superstar players, and then these mini walls come in, and they're so hard to get out in these conditions, and they'll get contributions, really important contributions. They might not get century after century, but those are the guys who are sort of the reason why India never really lose at home. Just 3 test defeats in the last 11 years now, and I think those 3 are a big reason why.
There was a big mark of that in the last English tour out there 3 years back, when I think of the final test match where Ashwin, I think, got 100, but Washington Sundar got 90 odd as well, I think. And you're absolutely right. And Jadeja, of course, is a kind of constant thorn in England's side, and loves playing against England because he can wind them up, and he has this ongoing needle match with Anderson that dates all the way back to a scrap in the long room or whatever may or may not have happened during one lunch break. And so it's all there for England's hearts to get broken on a weekly basis, for sure. All I would say, as I said last week, is that England will play their way, and India will have to confront that. And the smart money is obviously on them finding a way around it, and them leaning on those 3 monstrous cricketers, really, in home conditions, both with ball and with bat. Aksar got runs as well last time out, right? I think he certainly got 70 odd against England.
He was one of their best batters in that series against Australia last year.
Right, yeah.
He's really, really effective.
That said, as we saw with a deep point posted on for the first ball at Edgbaston by Pat Cummins, Rohit Sharma's nobody's fool, and they will have had a few long, inquisitive meetings about how to counter this extreme form of ultra aggression that we know it's coming.
I was going to ask you this later, but we're on it now. This might be obvious, but I think how England's top 3 goes will go a long way to defining how much of a shot
massively
England have. Because if you go through all three of them have had very good spells under Stokes and McCullum. Duckett averages over 50 since he returned in the side. Crawley had that brilliant Ashes. Pope averaged 45 in the 22 summer. But this India bowling attack, not just those 3 champion spin bowlers, but also Siraj, who just had a brilliant test match in South Africa, but Bumrah, who's barely actually played a home test match. That feels like the biggest challenge that a top 3 batter can really face in the world game at the moment, because, depending on conditions, you'll have Bumrah and Siraj, but if it's really turning, they will be very happy opening with Ashwin and Jadeja. Yeah,
but Bumrah's just so good. It's not a very original thing to say, but and he's good almost in a way that he poses a different sort of challenge to even the Australia quicks posed last summer, because you have sort of Cummins and Hazelwood, who are the metronomes who'll sort of pound away, but if you can find a way to score runs off them, then actually you can sort of find ways around that. And then you've got Stark, who will give you balls to hit while also bowling brilliant wicket-taking deliveries. But Bumrah kind of, in some ways, combines both of them. Like he's so accurate and nagging, and yet he can also he'll take your stumps out if he thinks there's a gap in the defence there. And he did a very interesting interview with Ali Martin in The Guardian yesterday, and part of it talked about his opinions on Bazball, and he made the point that it will at least keep him fresh. And, even if they make big scores, they're not going to bat for that long, because he's going to be able to charge in every single time. He doesn't have to worry, coming back for his 4th or 5th spell, because either England will have declared or more likely they'll have been bowled out for something less than they'd want, I guess. But Bumrah is just so good, and I mean, it'd be really, really fascinating to see how England go about playing him, as much as the other way around, as much as how he goes around about combating England. But I'd back him to come out on top in that, I think.
Siraj bowled well in South Africa. He looked sharp, I thought, and he's always at you. They have 2 broadly uncapped support seamers. You don't expect to see too much of them, I would guess, in the series.
Especially if Shami comes back for the 3rd test match.
Yes, of course. So he hasn't played since June. Of course, he missed that South Africa tour as well. But yeah, look, the team basically picks itself bowling-wise. You assume that all 3 spinners will probably play. As you say, 2 of them in the sort of middle order engine room anyway with the bat. So So it's a terrifying proposition for England. There's no two ways about it.
How do you feel that the sort of the less established England batters will go? Because I don't think it's a stretch to say it's a career defining year for a lot of them. England play 17 Test matches in the next 11 months. Crawley, Pope, if they remain in the team, there'll be 50 Test match players by the end of 2024.
I think your reading of it is absolutely bang on. I think England's chances not largely, but will be dictated by how well that top three goes, assuming now that Pope will play at 3. Are we agreed on that?
Yeah, I think with Brook not there, almost
so as you said earlier, there's more clarity now with the balance of the side. So Pope will play at 3. He's got no kind of record against India whatsoever. Duckett's never. No, he played in 2016. He played in 2016. Of course he did.
Yeah,
the Hasib Hamid tour. Yes, different player now, much more confident. Of course, he's talking about the horizontal shots to basically everything, and talking
at least 10 sweeps. Yeah,
Crawley is the enigma because people will remember Crawley looking static, like a sort of pylon at Ahmedabad and Chennai and so on, playing like he was facing a bowling machine when it was skidding and spitting all over the place. However, we'll also remember, I think, a 45 ball 50. I think in the Mad game, the Ahmedabad third Test match.
I think it was, but also exclusively against pace.
But this is what I'm coming to. Yeah, exactly that. And as soon as the spinner came on, I might be doing a disservice, but I think he was out to the spinner basically as soon as they came on. However, he had already played a potentially defining knock in the context of that Mad cricket match. It was the only contribution that he made all series. Different player, certainly with regards to his belief back then to now. He will have an effect on this series. He will have a day out. I'm not expecting he has too many because his game is not geared to playing spin. He's obviously very tall. So, he doesn't really crouch and swallow the spin. He doesn't really smother it particularly well. It's not really his way of doing it. But he will stand tall and he will play through the line, and there will be a moment or two where it works. He plays the real quicks sensationally well. Now, Bumrah, of course, swings it. But if he can get lucky in the first half an hour and get away, and a bit of lacquer comes off the ball and it doesn't move quite so much, and the conditions are with him for the first day or so, then he can have an effect on that series. As I say, I'm not expecting him to be a consistent run scorer as he was broadly during the Ashes on pitches where he understands and recognises. But I do still think he can have an effect somewhere. I'd probably hang more of a hope on Duckett because I think his game will be slightly more geared. But again, Bumrah can just blow you away. Bumrah is an all-timer. He's not just the bowler of now. He's an all-timer. And as you say, he'll be desperate to make that mark in India because it seems like the calendar is always against him and there's always a niggle or he's played hardly any Test matches in India. So Bumrah against the top 3 is absolutely integral, I think, to the story of this series.
If England are looking at that India attack and trying to find some element of hope, I guess they'd be looking at Siraj and Akshar Patel because those are the two who aren't kind of all-time greats.
But Siraj is an interesting one.
Yeah, because he
looked good, but England have had a lot of success against him, albeit in random conditions.
He does just blow hot and cold. That's kind of the bowl he is at the moment.
He bowls. We can take him balls, but he also gives you some balls as well.
He's
not metronomic, right? In the way that Shami is.
He's not un-Stuart Broad like in some ways in terms of that characteristic. In terms of he bowls these ridiculous spells. A lot of them against Sri Lanka, but also in that South Africa Test. But England.
So my worry on Siraj is that when you look at India overseas in South Africa in conditions where you only play one spinner, Siraj, when Shami's not playing, is in effect their second seamer, and he has to bowl a lot of overs, and he has to be more than just X-factor guy you bring on when you're hoping to break a partnership. In India, he doesn't have to bowl that much. Sort of whatever the conditions are, he can only bowl more often than not when conditions really, really suit him.
Yeah.
Whereas, you'd expect the 3 spinners to get through so many overs that Bumrah and Siraj remain pretty fresh.
Yeah, and also if England do, say, get a hold of his first 3 overs in an innings and take, 20 off them, it's a different thing as well, because they'll just take him out the attack and bring on, Ashwin or Jadeja.
Yeah.
But then the other thing is Akshar Patel, and as much as he had a very good Border Gavaskar Trophy with the bat, he had quite a poor one with the ball. And obviously he was so good against England last time out, and maybe these pitches will help him even more than they did in that series. I don't know. But England might think that, well, there might be a little opportunity there if we can get hold of this guy. But again, then Ashwin and Jadeja just bowl a few more overs, and maybe that doesn't matter so much.
Is Shami expected to be back for the second half of the series?
Yeah.
Okay, because that could be crucial for them. While you don't get through, obviously, a volume of overs as Bumrah and Siraj would be expected to be able to graze in the outfield for long periods of the day, and Test matches are probably not going to go 5 days, to say the least. Nonetheless, it is still quite condensed, and going into Dharamsala as well, the final game, the most seam-friendly conditions in India, traditionally at least, then he could be an absolutely key figure. If you're looking at it from England's perspective, in the first half of it, their best batsman and their other best seamer are both unavailable. And there's a possible question mark about the components of the middle order as well. It might be that they go in there with a relatively unproven keeper. So there are one or two slight little glimpses there for England. But in the end, they will have to play their cricket, know that they're coming up against storied great cricketers broadly, and throw themselves at it regardless. You know that they're going to...
Yeah, I mean, when Shami comes back, India will probably field their best ever bowling attack in home conditions. I don't think they played together as a quintet.
He's an absolute master, isn't he, Shami?
Yeah. We had a few questions, Phil, about Lawrence's call-up. Mo asked, why not bring in someone from the Lions? They're already on the ground and they're scoring runs, to replace Brook instead of Dan Lawrence. I mean, for me, it's not that controversial. Lawrence was the spare batter for the entirety of the 2023 summer, and that Lions team isn't a second 11.
Yeah, look, exactly that. If we are being particularly pernickety and inflexible, and if we are ignoring the absolute realpolitik of modern cricket, then sure, ideally he's hit some red balls rather than some white. But they weren't anticipating somebody, in Brook's case, going home. They weren't anticipating a significant injury. And Dan Lawrence, they want to keep him on side, of course, but they also want to allow him to earn some money in his off season. And
I think it extends more than money as well. So I think they'll look at players like Lawrence and Jamie Smith, for example, who've played a lot of red ball cricket for the Lions. They've spent a lot of winters, to this point in their career at least, focusing on the red ball. And we've seen in winters gone by, that one stint in one league could be totally transformative for a player's white ball development. And sort of Lawrence actually he's sort of been to these leagues, but he's not actually played full seasons in these leagues that often. So totally. I don't really have a problem with and players like Jacks, even Smith, Lawrence playing those leagues over being on that Lions tour.
Yeah, and also this isn't a new T20 cricket inspired thing. This happened even before the SA20 and the ILT20 sprung up, that players who'd been on a couple of Lions tours and around the England Test team wouldn't go on Lions tours even if they were, in the next best squad, because they just kind of been there, done that. And it can be, a bit of almost like a drag in some ways to have to keep going and doing that. So that's fine. And also, yeah, I mean, Lawrence, England do have to try and balance all three formats and development and all those. And like Lawrence does have the tools to be a very good white ball middle order batter, and England are currently looking for some of those. It's not impossible that he's a very, very good ODI number 4, and playing in T20 leagues will help him do that. I also think, to be honest, if I were to have to back it up, I reckon Lawrence probably plays a game in this series, at least not knowing what the situation with Brook, and they've left open the possibility that he could come back, but just with how these tours tend to go. And he did have a very good test last time he was out here. He made 96 runs in a game where a pitch turned a fair amount, and he's got the creativity to respond to the unique challenge you can get over here. I mean, it's almost, if you're Josh Bahaden, I don't think this is, as much as you want to play for England in whatever circumstances, this wouldn't be the tour you'd pick, right? You don't want to be coming in for the third or fourth test of a series when England are 3-0 down, and it's going to be turning a lot, and it's, pretty alien conditions to what you've done before, even if you have been on a Lions tour. I'd be more eyeing up that home summer and get the guy who's been around it and knows a bit what it's about as your backup player. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. A sort of a craggy, cutted 60 in a low-scoring game is a lot more important than having a couple of easy runs against the West Indies at home. The question about Lawrence is he the right call-up? The more interesting question is it the right option? And I think it's a horses for courses situation here. I think if an opener had gone down, then Jennings would have been called in and Lawrence wouldn't have been. But Lawrence is as near to a poor man's Harry Brook as you're going to get. And he does bowl interesting little floaters.
I was going to bring this up.
And one thing that marked England's still sort of slightly spectacular heist in Pakistan is that they had so many different options. They could turn to different people. Another little example is the madness of Harry Brook bowling to Steve Smith, right? Stokes likes options. He likes doing peculiar things at inopportune moments where people aren't expecting him to do so. I think Lawrence, as Ben says, Lawrence will play a test or two, and he'll bowl overs. He'll bat at 7, something like that. I reckon maybe even number 8. If we assume that Folkes is going to play something, we can see madness happening here, and Lawrence
allows them to do madness.
And Lawrence slips right into the madness.
I'm fully aware.
They like his style. They like his gumption. They like his attitude. And as Ben said, that last Test match out there, he made a 40 and a 50, and he batted selflessly in both innings from number 7, by the way, because he was Bumrah in the first half of that series at 3 out of his depth at 3 against a champion. But he can play in this team somewhere. As I say, if it had been a top order batsman, it would have been a different story. But look, it makes sense. It's the pragmatic choice.
Yeah, a lot of people look at his first class record and think, what are you going on about saying that he's a viable spin option? Well, he doesn't have to bowl that much at Essex. They've got a bloke called Simon Harmer, and they've got a second spinner in Matt Critchley is very decent as well. So he doesn't actually, when he was at Essex, there weren't that many opportunities for him to actually. Well, obviously that might change this summer.
What he does do is actually get it off the straight, more than established workaday professional spinners, if you like, in English cricket. He does get it off the straight, and he does have that useful little loop sometimes. He took a couple of wickets in England in that Test series against New Zealand a couple of years back. So, it's another little silly option for them, and they're going to need all of these silly options that they can possibly find.
I think it's worth just going through that Lions game against India A, because I don't know, I feel like we can potentially see a few things that might happen in the senior series as well. So England Lions hit 550 for 8 at nearly 5 and over in the first innings. Jennings and Bohannon scoring hundreds there. They then bowled India A out for 220. Matt Fisher and Matt Potts took 8 wickets between them. England then batted quickly in the third innings to leave India needing 480 to win. A total they very nearly hauled down, finishing the final day 60 or so runs short with 5 wickets in hand. I think that's an interesting game for a few reasons. Some people, myself have said, if India prepare properly flat pitches, that brings their spinners more into the game, gives them a greater advantage. But I think the danger for India will be something like this, where it is so flat that England score so quickly, it makes a result much, much more likely. And with that sort of scoreboard pressure, anything can happen. It also shows that in these conditions, seamers can still be really effective too. England's seamers of Anderson, Robinson, Wood and Atkinson will be really encouraged by seeing Fisher and Potts have that much success in that game. And I guess looking longer term into the future, I think it's interesting just how consistent Bohannon and Jennings have been now for really quite a long time. Bohannon averages nearly 50 over his first class career, and Jennings basically averages 50 since he joined Lancashire. I think a few years ago.
I think Jennings in a different era, still part of an expansive one. But if it wasn't the case that England had 2 established opening bats now, and slightly offish timing in that Duckett came through just when he was about to return, I think Jennings would have been a successful Test match opener. I think with his new technique now, where his backlift is consistently different and a lot more flow in his shots than there was in the first iteration when he played for England 5 or 6 years ago, I think he'd have been a decent enough Test match opening bat. It might be that time just runs past him and he'll be one of the unlucky ones. Bohannon, his runs are there to to prove a point. He's slightly pigeonholed as a sort of like an accumulator rather than a stroke maker. Nonetheless, he went at a good lick in that game, and his strike rate last year for Langs was notably higher than in his previous years.
I interviewed him, and he claimed that the influence of the Test side had no bearing on how he went about things.
I remember I asked Ben Folkes, who was on a Lions tour 2 or 3 years ago, who was the best player. He said Bohannon was the best player there. So he's very well respected within the game. I think he will play for England one day, Bohannon.
Ben, Ariane asked who ought to start the series as the second spinner.
It's a really good question. I would probably go for Rian Ahmed, I guess, as the most experience in Test cricket out of the three, having played the one game. I guess, and also just because Hartley is another left arm spinner, and you imagine they'd want some sort of variation, obviously. And Rian Ahmed has the googly, so although you'd think, okay, he's a leg spinner, he's spinning it the same way as Jack Leach as well. He's got that googly, which can sort of makes him a different proposition. And then so you're kind of thinking, is it Rian Ahmed or Shamar Bashir? Well, one, I guess we're going to come to this, Bashir's not even in the country yet, so his build up is going to be limited. And then Rian Ahmed also offers you some stuff with the bat. Obviously, it's a risk because he's a leg spinner bowling in India. There's probably finger spinners have had a bit more success there than wrist spinners have had.
I can't even think of a wrist spinner who has had success in India.
That's the thing.
The last 25
That's why
years.
I wouldn't go with Rayan for the first game. Personally.
I mean, I've seen a few people make the point that Australia basically opted to give games to two totally unproven finger spinners over a more established wrist spin option in Mitchell Swepson, and they did that with success last year. So
replicating, obviously, this is on a different level of quality, but India go in with two left arm spinners and an off spinner. You might have heard of them; they're quite good. Yeah. England I think, will go in with two left arm spinners and an off spinner, and the off spinner will be Joe Root.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not making before they come for me on the YouTubes. My God, what a place that is! But clearly, I'm not making a comparison on quality. Yeah, folks, just on makeup.
I think you should say it. Off mic. You're always saying that Root's a better off spinner than Ashwin.
I think Hartley will probably play.
Yeah, okay.
I think give more because of all the talk around what they're looking for from their spinners. Hartley not only is that, but Rahan Ahmed is not that in terms of he's I know he's quicker than Adil Rashid through the air, for example, but he's not as quick as someone like Hartley. He's not as tall as Hartley as well. And yeah, I can't actually think the last time a wrist spinner, but probably since Kumble, there hasn't been a successful wrist spinner in India, and Kumble is a totally different type of wrist spinner to Rahan.
Yeah, again though, I'd be surprised if he doesn't get a game.
100%.
It surprised us all when he played in the third test in Pakistan, but again, it's the way Stokes does it. And I think Graham Swan was quite interesting on him. So Swan spent some time with the spinners on a tour, on a performance tour or whatever. And he gave an interview to the Mail, to Paul Newman at the Mail. It was an interesting interview, actually. And he's good, Swan, when he talks about other people rather than himself. And he said about Rayan that he needs to back himself more. He backs himself more as a batter than he does as a bowler at the moment. And he needs to believe more in his bowling. That he sees himself, he was sort of implying that he sees himself more as a batter. Or that he backs that side of things. So perhaps he comes in as a fantasy player at number 7, when they're 3-1 down or going into the last. Or
3-1 up.
Or 3-1 up.
It could be 3-1 up.
Yeah, sure. I do think it will be a really good series, this. I genuinely do.
The other thing about the Hartley, Rian Ahmed, Shamar Bashir question is just the make for that India top 6. It's 2 left-handers in there, but then you might hope that the seamers see off Jaiswal with the new ball, ideally, and then Jadeja is the number 6, but he is so good that he is worth taking into account. But still, Root and Anderson and Wood or whoever it happens to be, they would, you'd maybe back them to get Jadeja, not back them to get him. But if England are going to win, they're going to need to take some left-hand wickets with some seam bowling, I think.
But also, off spinners can get right-handers out.
That's true. Yeah, it is
allowed to get left-handers out as well. Worth mentioning that Shamar Bashir is not yet, at the time of recording, in India. He had some visa issues leaving the UAE. He's currently in the UAE with with an ECB employee. Brendan McCullum yesterday, when speaking to the media, said that Bashir should still be available for that first test match, but obviously less than ideal preparation. So we've heard Phil's prediction for the series, 3-2 India. Ben, what are you going?
4-1 to India.
Cool.
And you?
I think 3-1 India. I think there still will be a draw. As we saw from that England-Lions game, it is possible for teams to back quickly and still end up not getting a result. Let's head to Mark Butcher to hear his thoughts on the series. Butch, Harry Brook and Virat Kohli will both miss sections of the series for personal reasons. With Brook out, do you just see a straight swap with Ben Foakes coming in and taking the gloves?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of made the question around whether or not Bairstow or Pope gets into the starting 11 a moot one. I suspect they will both play. I suspect that Foakes will indeed take his place at number 7 and keep wicket, which then of course leaves England with the issue of sort of 4 specialist bowlers plus Joe Root. And if the surfaces are as we expect them to be, then 2 of those 4 will be spin bowlers. Yeah, I mean, we knew whatever happened, and this is before obviously Brook pulling out of the entire series, that it was going to be very difficult to sort of put what you would call a balanced side out there on the park, and that hasn't really changed. But it does mean good news for Ben Foakes and Ben Foakes fans.
How highly do you rate Joe Root's off spin? It's probably the first time in his career where he'll go into a series considered as a genuine all-round option. He's probably the only genuine all-rounder England will field in that first Test match.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's decent. I mean, he isn't a frontline spin bowler, and as was evidenced in the final innings at Edgbaston in that first Ashes Test match, the lack of having Jack Leach on that final day probably cost England the game. Well, along with 1 or 2 other things. Not scoring enough runs in the first innings might be another one. But yeah, I mean, as one of 3, I think he can do a job for sure. And if the pitches turn a lot, then he's as useful as anybody.
And how do you see the rest of the bowling lineup looking? Because England, when they've previously toured Asia under Stokes and McCullum, they had loads of all-rounders to give them a bit of balance. Even looking at Australia doing all right in India in 2023, they had Green to balance the attack so they could play 3 spinners but also field a couple of seamers at the same time. How do you see England balancing that?
Well, I mean, they can't. That's the issue. And whatever options, it only leaves them with the option of playing two specialist seam bowlers. And the issue that you have there is that no matter which 2 you pick, it gives you a little bit of an issue. So obviously you can't bowl Mark Wood into the ground; he'll have to be used very sparingly. Jimmy Anderson is not in the first flush of youth, obviously, as well. So and without you remember how devastating it was when the ball reverse swung in that first Test match in Chennai back in, what was that, 2021? So if he gets conditions that are favourable in that regard, then he can be devastating, as we know. But if you don't, then there's going to be a lot of hard slog, and the spinners will have to be able to hold. If you lose the toss and you end up batting first, there's going to be a lot of onus on Leach and Rayan Ahmed, or Leach and Hartley, to be able to hold the game as well as take wickets, just to give to be able to give your seam bowlers enough time off their feet to be effective when the time is right for them to bowl. And it's a big ask on a leg spinner perhaps who's played very, very few games, very few first class matches, let alone Test matches, or on Tom Hartley, who'd be making a debut. And of course Jack Leach has hardly been in action since the middle of our last summer. So it's going to be tough.
India obviously start the series as overwhelming favourites, but how much does Kohli's absence change the equation for you? Because it's a lineup still full of superstar names, of huge names in the IPL, etc. But other than Rohit Sharma, there are question marks hovering over all of them. You know, Jaiswal's at the start of his Test career. Shubman Gill's had a quiet couple of few years in Test cricket. KL Rahul's had a very up and down Test career. Shreyas Iyer's excellent in spinning conditions, but England will have the pace of Mark Wood to cause him trouble. And KS Barrett is someone who, if he plays, he's got, I think he averaged something like 15 in Test cricket. So, you know, how much do you think Kohli's absence might change things?
Yeah, I think it's a huge plus for England. I was talking with Stuart Broad over here in South Africa over breakfast this morning, and he sort of said, you know, as a bowler, if he was going out there, he'd think that you know that the Indian lineup was vulnerable, that they were gettable with the lack of Kohli. But of course, you know, again, think back to the last time England toured there, when Rohit and Rishabh Pant aside, the rest of India's batting lineup struggled, not quite as much as England's, but to a real degree. You know, I think Kohli averaged 20 in the series or 21, Rahane 17. You know, so the onus on Rohit to once again show what an incredible player he is in adverse batting conditions will be very high.
Talking of that 2021 series, England won that first Test match, and then the wheels fell off spectacularly in the 3 tests that followed. Obviously, the way in which England go about their cricket now is very different to how they did back then. But what lessons do you think they'll take from that tour?
Well, I think they'll know that, and this would come as no surprise because it's the way they play their cricket in any conditions, really. They'll know that sort of just hanging in there is not going to be massively helpful if the ball turns as much as we expect it to. So, you know, they'll be looking to try and put some pressure back on the Indian bowlers. And then as far as with the ball is concerned, you know, you can use those conditions very much to your favour if you're able to block off scoring options whilst keeping catching men in. And you know, and Stokes is very, very good at doing that too. I think it's always an underplayed part of his success and England's success under his captaincy, just how brilliant they've been with the ball in terms of squeezing and strangling opposition and creating chances. So I don't think a great deal will change from the way that they played their cricket under Ben Stokes. And I think the lessons that they've learned from that last tour is that they're going to have to take a punt. You know, we might get some very fast Test matches, one way or the other. And again, with India being absolute, you know, resounding favourites. But England will figure that their best chance of trying to upset the apple cart there is by throwing them off their rhythm and by trying to put them under as much pressure as possible with the bat, and squeeze as hard as they possibly can with the ball.
How do you see the series going? Obviously, India are favourites, but do you think England will nick a couple of Test matches at least?
I don't know. I mean, you know, people winning Test matches in India is a rarity. And given the you know, the lack of cricket that England have played, that my fear is that first Test match comes around and they get caught a little bit cold. They got caught a little bit cold in the Ashes. You could say that, and sort of took 3 Test matches to get into it. And if that happens in India, then you're going to get snowed under. It perhaps wouldn't surprise me if they managed to find a win somewhere. Yeah. But as far as winning the series is concerned, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. Which is not to say that I hope that miracles don't happen and that they pull off some kind of heist. But just, you know, given all of the weight of evidence and history and the way that India play at home, and the issues that England have in terms of fielding what is a truly balanced 11 against them, means that they're right up against it, I think.
So for me, it's looking at that Indian bowling attack. This England batting lineup has done amazing things under Stokes and McCullum, but I don't think they've come up against anything quite like this. I mean, Bumrah, for example, he's only actually ever played 5 home Test matches. Remarkably, he's done most of his work away from home, and then to be up against Jadeja, Ashwin and Axar, and then Siraj for the first 2 Test matches, and Shami comes back. That is an attack that covers all bases for Indian conditions so well. So that challenge, you know, you saw, I think it's quite interesting looking at the England Lions game against India A recently. England were able to pile on a massive first innings score on a flat pitch and score at a very quick rate. And England have had success doing similarly against other opposition. I'm not sure if they'll be able to against this Indian lineup, or for me at least, that's the big question going into the series.
Yeah, and I think that highlights the fact that they're going to need to try and sort of accelerate the game when they bat. Try to score even if it's a 50, 60 over innings, but try and get in the game by making 250, 280 or something in quick time, because their way of playing simply is not that they're going to be looking to bat 140 overs and make 500, and the conditions probably won't allow that anyway. Look, a lot of this is conditions dependent. I mean, India, they're unlikely to do this, but they might think, well, against such an inexperienced bowling attack, that we probably don't have to go quite as hard in terms of the preparation of the surfaces to rag from ball one. However, the evidence of our own eyes over the last 2 or 3 years against all opposition has been that is definitely going to be the case. So, as I said, might be good fun, but might be fast.
Absolutely. Well, the wait is nearly over. The Test series starts in 2 days' time. Butch, cheers for your time. Catch you soon. Ben, on India, it's no exaggeration to say that India and Afghanistan played one of the great T20 matches the other day. A game that went to not just one, but 2 super overs, and that saw Rohit Sharma play a truly great 100 as he and Rinku Singh put on 190 for the 5th wicket, having come in at 22 for 4.
Yeah, that was the thing about this game. It was already ridiculous even before you got to the 2 super overs. If it had been, won by 1 run or, by how many wickets off the last ball, then you'd still be saying that was an excellent game of cricket. Because 20 for 4 to 200 and change was extraordinary. Rohit Sharma was obviously brilliant, and having there was just a little bit of pressure building. He hadn't played a T20I in 2023. His last knock was in the 2022 T20 World Cup final, where his and India's approach came in for a bit of stick. He sort of showed a new gear in the World Cup, but you're still thinking like there was sort of a suggestion in Indian cricketing circles they might have actually just quietly moved on from him and Kohli, that Pandya had come in as captain, done a good job, has done a very good job as captain of Gujarat Titans. Mumbai Indians made him captain as well over Rohit Sharma. So it kind of seemed like that transition might have happened in stealth. Then they do bring those 2 back for this series. Kohli played a very small but very good cameo in the second game, his first game in the series. But Rohit started with 2 ducks, and so you think, well, if he fails again, or even worse, makes sort of like a slow start that suggests he hasn't changed, then you've just got the IPL and then the T20 World Cup. So maybe they will be pushed into making sort of change, especially given all the players they have around that could come in and kind of deserve a spot, essentially. And he did start slowly because India lost wickets and then caught up in kind of extraordinary fashion. And also Rinku Singh was brilliant too, because we've seen his sort of finishing right at the end of an innings. We maybe hadn't seen him do this sort of thing, which number 6s still do have to do sometimes. And this is the kind of thing that a number 6 can do this and win you a World Cup, basically. That's you need to be able to do lots of different things as a team. And it's not like in a franchise tournament where you can shrug off the loss here and there, because if that comes in the wrong game, then you have an issue. So the game was already brilliant, and Afghanistan did brilliantly to chase it. There was an amazing sort of 6 save from Virat Kohli that ended up proving absolutely crucial. Yeah. And then it comes to the super over thing, and it was packed with with more incident than most whole T20 games are. You had the end of Afghanistan's super over batting first. You had a bit of an overthrow controversy where a throw from the wicketkeeper hit one of the Afghanistan batters, and they then ran 2 more. And Virat Kohli sort of like stood there with his arms raised with the ball at his feet as they kind of kept running, being like, how could they be doing this? And then after the game was all sort of quashed, Rahul Dravid saying like, nah, it's fair enough for people to run in that sort of situation. Let's not complain too much. And then in the second innings, you had a great playing conditions thing going on where
here we go.
Did you see this, Phil, or not?
No.
So you might like this actually. So last ball of the super over, Rohit, he's batted brilliantly in it to get within 2 runs to win. But he's at the non-strikers end, and he's like, well, I'm batting well, but I'm not the fastest member of the team, so I'm actually going to retire out here and let a sprinter come into bat, basically, to be at the non-strikers end. So he retires out. He doesn't retire hurt. He retires out.
Yeah, right. Final ball of the innings.
Yes, yeah. But then the super over is tied, so it goes to another super over. And in the IC playing conditions, it says
you have to carry on with the player.
Well, no, it says if you're dismissed in a previous super over, you can't bat in a subsequent super over.
Oh, marvellous.
So Rohit did still come out to bat, which is either a mistake by the umpires or there's a tiny difference between being
No, it's a
out
mistake
and
for the
being
umpires.
dismissed. Yeah, okay.
It's a mistake from the umpires.
So that's
there is not a difference between being out and being dismissed.
Well, the thing is there is in other parts of the laws of cricket. So if you retire out, you are allowed to resume batting if the opposing captain says it's okay to. So
Good
there,
point.
which is different to other forms of being dismissed.
Yeah.
You can't get bowled and come back out on number 9 because the opposing captain says it's okay. So there is a small difference elsewhere. So it's possible that is a difference, but there's not been any statement on this. The MCC probably won't issue a statement because it's a playing conditions thing, not a laws thing. The IC don't tend to, bother being issuing clarity in this sort of thing. And then India won the game comfortably in the end in the second Super Over. But yeah, a terrific game of cricket and quite an important one actually for India's World Cup plans.
To Australia, they went 1-0 up at home to the West Indies. Pretty straightforward win for Australia, but there's an amazing story in that of Shamar Joseph, who debuted for West Indies. He took a fifer and got Steve Smith out with his very first ball in Test cricket. There's a brilliant interview with him on CricBuzz, which details his story. So he's from a village in Guyana that's so remote they didn't have internet connection or coloured TV until 2018. He was working as a security guard as recently as a year ago. He caught the eye of a few big names in the past 2 years, and he's had this extraordinary rise where he's made his first class debut, CPL debut after impressing in the nets, and now Test debut. And he looks like one hell of a bowler. He bowls in the around 140, 145 kph, so high 80s, early 90s miles per hour. And you look forward to that England-West Indies series in the summer, and sure, the West Indies are short on established high-quality Test batters, but there's a bowling attack of Roach, Holder if he's back in the fold, Alzari Joseph, Jaden Seals, and now Shamar Joseph. They do have a serious attack, and actually man for man as strong and potentially, depending on availability, even stronger than England. So yeah, that will be a interesting series to follow come the summer.
It draws attention as well to this discrepancy between quicks and batters, and how you can be raw and effective if you have pace through the air, but to get runs at the top level, you need, if you like, a sort of infrastructure of good facilities, good coaching, experience, of course, a quality first-class setup, or at least a functioning first-class setup. And so as you see the sort of husk of a middle order, totally unproven, thrown to the wolves, being hollowed out into sort of routine innings by Australia, and in fairness, it's happened to better middle orders than that as well, of course. But then you have the story of Joseph and one or two others as well coming through, and you can get away with it up to a point when you're talking about quick bowlers, because there's something primal about it. Whereas with batters, you need more support, you need more help, really, and it's impossible not to feel sorry for them, really. As it was, they didn't disgrace themselves across the game. I wouldn't say they were ever in it properly, but at one point, Australia they relied on a Travis Head 100 to get a lead of 90 odd in that first innings. You take that out, and then it's parity after 2 knocks, 2 innings. They didn't disgrace themselves. He also made runs as well, right, Joseph?
He did, yeah.
He made a 30 odd from number 11.
He did.
So yeah, great personal story. And again, you get this in cricket, even though the result was never in doubt, really, and you wouldn't have even got any odds beforehand on an Australia win. Nonetheless, the story from the game is Shamar Joseph, and that's what it can do. That's the beauty of this game of ours. That one person's story can eclipse the result, elevate the game away from the humdrum result, and give us something else, something more valuable to talk about.
In the BBL, there was another feel-good story, not quite to the same level as that of Joseph. Josh Brown, who's 30 and only made his pro debut in December 2022, scored a ridiculous 100 in the qualifier for the BBL final.
Was this the 12 sixes thing?
Yeah, so he hit 140 or 57 deliveries to get Heat into the final.
Bloody hell.
Sort of came from nowhere last season, and Ben was saying before we started recording, he scored a 50
inside the power play in his second professional game. And there's a really good sort of reaction image of Glenn Maxwell watching him going like, just mouth completely wide open, not believing what he's seeing. He said that until the age of 24, he didn't actually know he was any good at cricket, basically. So when you talk about batters coming from nowhere, I guess there's one example, albeit it's taken him a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It's got a whiff of the Graham Napiers. Very similar figures.
Yeah.
Napiers was 150 off 50 odd balls, and came from nowhere, completely out of left field.
Wasn't expecting a Graham Napier reference to the
The only reason was I was in a pub yesterday in Essex, and there was a huge Graham Napier. It's a bit like an altarpiece to Napier in the Orange Tree Boozer, just up the road from the cricket ground.
Excellent.
You're determined to get it in somehow. Yeah.
There we go.
In New Zealand, Pakistan lost 4-1 in a T20I series. Shaheen's first series as captain. Ben, just continues a disastrous few months for Pakistani cricket.
Yes, it does. And their T20 side, if we're taking that just separately from the Test side and the ODI side getting knocked out of the World Cup, is also just not having a great time of it since they got to that Team World Cup final. I think they've lost, if you take out the Asian Games, whatever it was called, which they had a second string team for, they've lost 8 out of 12 games they've played. And in this series, the bowling was not great, you'd hope. And if they are going to make a charge at the T20 World Cup, they just need to have their first choice bowling attack fit, because the understudies are not of the same level of Nazim, Shaheen and Harris Rauf. And Rauf had not a great series as well, and there's rumours of discontent. Well, just straightforward report of discontent around him because of the stuff with the Test series when he opted out, and then just general unhappiness there. So hoping that all gets sorted. And then there's the question around the batting lineup, and just the crazy disparity between Babar and Rizwan and the rest, and then the criticism of Babar and Rizwan, and
when they're the only two guys who ever score runs.
Well, yeah, and because kind of if you squint, you can kind of just about see that there's promise sort of outside of them, because Simo, who plays this brilliant innings in the first game of the series, Faxman actually did have a good series with the bat. Mohammed Harris, who really should have been in this squad, is a very promising player as well. And then also you look at what they did, and they were, the only two guys to make any sort of runs, but 3 of the 450s you'd say were actively didn't help Pakistan in those games. I mean, they might well have lost them anyway, because often they were chasing big scores, but still that can sort of be levelled at them. But then you just look at the overall numbers, looking at since the start of 2020. Firstly, those two have each made over 2,000. So they made 5,000 runs between them, each made over 2,000 runs. No one else made even 1,000 for Pakistan. And also they each average, Babar averages 38, Rizwan averages 56 in T20 cricket in that time. The only other players to average over 22 are Hafiz, Shan Masood and Shoaib Malik.
Not exactly the future of T20 cricket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
I know we talked about this before we started recording. I sort of think with Pakistan, they're a really good T20 side. They've got the best, probably the best fast bowling T20 attack in the world, and Babar and Rizwan make sure they get to par. When that team attack is back, I still back them to have a pretty good T20 World Cup. It's not as if, I do get the criticism around Babar and Rizwan, but who else is there? There's no one in Pakistani T20 cricket who's scoring runs consistently outside the setup. You've got guys who've got decent strike rates, but whenever they get a chance for Pakistan, they're not really doing anything. Anyway, moving on. We've got some news from the 100. Pay has gone up for players in the women's competition. The highest paid players will earn £50,000 in 2024. It was only £15,000 3 years ago. So significant progress being made there. Elsewhere in the English game, Alex Davies has been named as the new Warwickshire captain after Will Rhodes stepped down at the end of 2023. And Sikandar Raza joins Northants for the Blast. It's a signing I'm very excited about, because I think it's the perfect Blast signing, because half the Blast overlaps with the T20 World Cup, the 20-team T20 World Cup. So getting Raza in is basically as good as it gets, as Zimbabwe famously didn't qualify
they're genius
Oh,
for
the tournament.
Northants are picking out unexpected T20 players and 4-day players as well now, right? With Karen Nair back in again for the first 7 games of the championship season.
When I saw the Raza press release come in, my worry was, does Raza know his value in this Blast? Surely every single team should want Raza in the competition. Anyway, moving on. There was a suggestion the other day on Twitter from Kevin Pietersen and AB de Villiers, where Pietersen suggested that all sixes over 100 metres should be awarded 12 runs to the batter. And then de Villiers suggested that that's a pretty good idea, but it should be more like 8 or 9 runs. and then separately suggested that commentators should replace TV umpires for all umpire decisions that go upstairs. Initial thoughts on those?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of either of those. I guess I don't mind the sort of the Big Six thing as a sort of gimmick in something that doesn't matter. But I kind of like that. You know, we had a listener get in touch a while ago that said he doesn't understand the fascination with the size of sixes, and I do like that a six that lands just outside the rope is worth the same as an absolutely massive one, and do kind of feel like sure it kind of looks good, but also like who cares sort of thing. And then obviously the commentator one is completely balmy. I mean,
did you say that AB said maybe 9 because it's an upside down 6?
Yeah, that as well. Yeah.
Did you mention that?
No, I didn't know, but yeah, you did say that.
Yeah, there you go. Maybe
that's all you need to say.
Maybe just give it 36 because it's 6 times 6. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Total bollocks. Forget it. Ridiculous.
Cool. To finish the show, the answer to the trivia question.
Oh yeah.
So a reminder to everyone, including Ben and Phil.
I tell you
the question was: what is the highest? Which England opener post-war, totally post-war, so Hutton doesn't count, has the highest average while opening the batting in Test cricket, men's Test cricket, with a cut-off of 1,500 runs?
So I think it's Michael Vaughan.
He is third.
Interesting.
He averages 45.48 opening.
Okay. Can I talk
but
it through?
It's a good answer. You know, it's ahead of Cook, it's ahead of Stewart.
No, don't start saying other names. The first person I thought, and I've been playing it out through the show, the first person I thought is Dennis Amiss.
Correct. Dennis Amiss averaged 53.7 opening the batting with 1100s from 39 tests. When I saw this, I was trying to wonder, why does no one talk about him as one of England's leading openers?
They do, mate. Don't worry about that.
And also
you might, but I think a lot of listeners will be surprised by that answer.
A pioneering one-day batter as well, made the first ever one-day century and the first ever World Cup century. I once spent an hour on the phone with Dennis Amiss for Wisden Cricket Monthly. A lovely hour and a very polite man.
So hold on.
Hang on. I was trying to work out why he's not regarded in the same bracket as the people immediately below him on the list. So below him on the list, Boycott, Cook, Vaughan, Stewart, etc. The reason is, from 11 Ashes tests, he averaged 15.
There you go.
And we know how much that is valued within English cricket.
But also he blossomed late as well and was absolutely prolific for about 2 or 3 years. But then went to play in World Series cricket as well in the late 70s. And so perhaps lost another year or two to fully cement himself as a legendary player. But he made 100 hundreds. I think he made 102 first-class hundreds.
And 2 double hundreds against that West Indies
that's
side.
The thing.
So he made
exactly.
The 242 to save a test in a series that England drew, I think, 1-1 or 2-2.
Exactly.
And the Tony Greig 15-wicket series.
Exactly that. Like a 10-hour double hundred. And of course, he made a 200 and something or other here at the Oval as well against Holding in that famous Test match in '76.
Yeah.
So that's going to help you.
Average 70 against West Indies from 10 Test matches, which is
with a technique that he developed to combat the quicks, which was a bit counterintuitive. He went inside the line rather than staying leg side of the line, and the tradition, especially pre-helmets, was that you would tend to sway, keep leg side, leg stump line. Well, he went the other way, and it paid dividends for him towards the back end of his career.
I'd say that's a successful launch of that new segment.
So I came alive for that last bit. This is good stuff. Take me back to the good old days.
Cool. That is everything for today's show. Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Ben. Listeners, we'll be back for our first daily episode on Thursday afternoon.